Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss what we know about the conversation between new Prime Minister Liz Truss and America's President Joe Biden regarding the Northern Ireland Protocol and the political game that's going to be at play here. The upshot seems to be that either as a result of the call or otherwise, Truss seems to be backing off a little on the idea of imminent action, but at the same time, yeah, this is all still to play for. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, obviously, when a major economy gets a new head of government, they can expect phone calls from other major heads of government, generally just pleasantries, but also an opportunity to make clear the common areas of interest and concern. President Biden, in his first conversation with Truss as Prime Minister, has unsurprisingly warned her about ripping up the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Tories' current line on the protocol, which has changed an awful lot since they first wrote it and voted it through Parliament, is that it jeopardises the Good Friday Agreement, you see, and that's really important. Now, let us begin by being very clear here. The Northern Ireland Protocol jeopardises the Good Friday Agreement like antibiotics make a bacterial infection worse. It's a fairly brainless thing to say until you realise they're only saying it to try and convince people who have no idea what either of these treaties are. The Northern Ireland Protocol exists purely for maintaining the Good Friday Agreement. That isn't just one of its purposes. It's its only purpose. If it wasn't doing that, you wouldn't want it at all. But therein lies the Tories' argument at the moment. You know, but what's more, when the Tories, remember it's the Tories who negotiated it. It exists because of the Tories, no one else, just the Tories. When the Tories were negotiating it, telling the public to vote for it, passing it through Parliament themselves, they were perfectly clear about that. It exists to protect the Good Friday Agreement. It protects the Good Friday Agreement. The Tories have never claimed that the protocol was intended for anything else other than protecting the Good Friday Agreement. And what's more, the EU, Ireland and the United States were all equally clear that this was the purpose of the protocol, and they were all satisfied that it did the job. All this rhetoric, first from Johnson and now from Truss, is to fool people with short memory spans who couldn't tell you the first thing about the details of either treaty. It's that simple. It's like Brexit itself. The Brexiteers promised one thing during the referendum campaign. As soon as they'd got that result, the result they wanted, all of a sudden it all changed. Oh, it was something completely different now. It's the same thing with the Northern Ireland Protocol. They lied and they all these things about it up until they'd got it passed and it was all done and dusted. Then they changed their tune on it. They're liars. But they're not going to fool government officials. Any government officials, including the United States. Not at all. And for those who think this is just Biden with his overtly Irish identity, it's worth pointing out that this is not a partisan issue in America. People see a lot of common ground between the Tories and the Republican Party, and indeed there is. Almost certainly because it's the same foreign money that's funded and influenced them both. But the Good Friday Agreement is something that Democrats and Republicans both agree must be preserved. And what's more, they are both clear that the Northern Ireland Protocol is an essential tool in maintaining that agreement. There's no party politics in America over this issue at all. Not at all. It's not like the Tories just have to wait until Republicans take over again. When Republicans were in control under Trump, Johnson was being warned not to trash the protocol then. So anyway, Biden has reportedly warned Truss over her stated intentions with the protocols. He has welcomed her stated desire to seek a negotiated settlement, but I think the implication is, yeah, the negotiated settlement isn't your preferred option, it's the only option. Now, I've said before that the EU have been reasonably clear about the consequences for unilateral action on the protocol, but the United States have not, at least not publicly. So imagine the scenario. So let us say, for whatever reason, Liz Truss goes full crazy and just dismantles the protocol altogether, whether it's in the next few months or next year, whatever. Let's say she's got a Northern Ireland Protocol bill. Well, it's an act now because it's been passed into law. So the British courts can't stop her, because that's all that bill exists for, to stop the British courts stopping her. International courts won't be happy. It still breaches international law, but they take ages to do anything. And when they do something, it's not really that serious anyway. You know, I know what the EU would have to do. They would have to suspend the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. That's not speculation. They've said so. What I don't know is what the United States would do. I'm sure there are lots of people confident in their speculation that they would act in this way or that way, but that's all it is, speculation. There has not been any public statement threatening specific consequences other than saying that the United States will not agree a trade deal with the UK if we jeopardise the protocol. But they're not agreeing a trade deal anyway. I mean, I get the impression that the Tories have now come to terms with that for the foreseeable future. But it's possible that US officials have privately warned their counterparts in the UK government of specific reprisals. I don't know. What I do know is that there was a lot of talk of Liz Truss triggering Article 16 quite soon, and now those close to her are saying this won't happen. Not that triggering Article 16 would have done anything. The reason it was seen as imminent is because we've got another round of grace periods about to end. What? Next week. The threats were probably just a crude device to persuade the EU to extend those grace periods. Brexit runs in circles, really. You know, we had to keep asking for extensions to the Article 50 period because the Tories couldn't get their act together. Now they keep asking for extensions to the grace periods for the same reason. Only with this, the Tories are deliberately failing to get their act together. They never want the grace periods to end. And the grace periods over time represent an ever greater threat to the integrity of the single market. You know, it allows for smuggling. The EU don't want things smuggled into their territory. If the UK government is happy for things to be smuggled into the British market, that's up to us. I mean, I wouldn't have thought we should want that, but the government are happy with that. The EU are not. So it's not straightforward for the EU to agree. They must surely realise by now that, let's say Truss says, look, we just need an extension, you know. I know things went a bit slowly, but I'm going to get things sorted. I just need another year to sort it out. If they did that and we got another year later, nothing would be sorted out. They'll be in the same position a year later and she'll be going, oh yeah, you know, we had these problems, you see, we would, you know, I just need another year. But this is where the tricky politics comes in. Because so I've tried to set the record straight for those who maybe support the idea that the Northern Ireland Protocol is not doing its job. Pro-EU viewers need to realise something as well. Because I sometimes see this misconception. The United States doesn't give a crap about the single market. You know, people sort of think because the EU are in the right and because the EU are a more important partner for the United States, much more powerful economically and so on, that, you know, the United States will back the EU over this. Not necessarily. Because the single market represents a challenge to America's economic model. As far as the US is concerned, the EU can agree to maintain these grace periods forever and just put up with the smuggling that it causes. There's no skin off America's nose. The EU are less keen on this, but the politics is tricky. The EU should, properly speaking, refuse to extend the grace periods. They've held up their end of the bargain. It's the UK who have been lax in not implementing the systems they promised. And everyone knows this, apart from some sections of the British public. But the UK could try and argue that if only the EU would agree to a few nominal easings of the agreement, that Truss would, she could sell the main structure of the protocol to her party and it would all be fine. It'll be lies, of course. Of course it'll be lies. Her ERG taskmasters want the whole thing scrapped for ideological reasons, but Truss could argue with this. I'd be very surprised if the EU, you know, fail to see the lie in it at this point. But the problem is, the EU need to behave in a way that gives confidence around the world. You know, they need to demonstrate to others that they are reasonable and that they stick to their word. The UK government, the one we have at the moment, doesn't care about that. It doesn't care about trashing its international reputation. It talks about global Britain. It's a lie. They do not care how badly they behave. They do not care who they piss off. You know, and if backed into a corner whereby Truss uses her Northern Ireland Protocol bill, if it becomes law, to dismantle the whole protocol, she will inevitably try to argue, it's just because the EU wouldn't be reasonable on these minor little points here. Because I noticed from the report that, yes, Biden has warned Truss not to unilaterally dismantle the protocol. But he also reportedly said that he wanted to see compromise on both sides. Now, being clear, like I say, the EU have actually done everything they agreed to in the protocol. Everything. The UK government have not. We haven't implemented what we agreed. It's not just that we're being difficult. It's not just that we're wanting to wriggle out of things we agreed to. There are things we were supposed to have implemented by now that we have not. So when Biden says both sides need to compromise, what he's saying is he wants the UK to do more of what our government already agreed to do. And he wants the EU to offer something extra, to do more than they agreed to do. Because they've already done what they agreed to do. So inevitably, he's asking them to do more. Biden and the US don't care about maintaining the EU's economic power base. Only peace in Ireland, that's it. So the trick for Truss is to persuade the US that the threats to peace in Ireland is the EU being difficult about these, their bean counters being difficult about these minor, irrelevant points, dotting the I's. It doesn't have to be dotted. We know it's an I. That what they're wanting from the EU is reasonable. Now, under Johnson, the UK sent lots of emissaries to try and persuade the various branches of the US government that its position was reasonable, that the EU were in the wrong. Now, it never worked, but it's what they'll keep trying to do. Not that I understand quite why the Tories are more concerned about the US than the EU. Like, if the US started a trade war with the UK, that would be very damaging. If the EU dissolved the trade and cooperation agreement, we've got nothing. It's not just that we can't win a trade war with them. We can't even take part. The way a trade war works is one side restricts your access to their market, so then you retaliate. But we can't restrict their access to our market. We don't have the systems or staff in place to do it. In fact, we're supposed to be restricting their access to our market more than we already are, in line with the agreement. We're doing less than that. But Truss, just like Johnson before her, finds herself in this impossible position because of ridiculous lies that they told supporters about what was achievable. She can't back down, because then she'd lose her support. Political oblivion. But she can't follow through on her ultimate threat, because that would also lead to political oblivion, albeit later on. So she'll carry on doing what Johnson tried, get the US on side to put pressure on the EU to keep making concessions. But the concessions will never end. There's no end game here for the ERG other than completely wrecking the Northern Ireland Protocol. In fact, they don't even want the trade and cooperation agreement. They want no agreements between the UK and the EU. Bear in mind, the EU have already made several concessions. They were never acknowledged by the Tories. You wouldn't read about them in the Tory press. They're blackmailers. You submit to one demand, they'll make another and another. The best thing the EU can do is just try and string this out until the general election, where they can hopefully see a more sensible UK government form and then move forwards. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.